Guys, it's F. Tom, whatever. We're getting in some SPL picks, so why don't we just get right to it? We've had a bye week. A lot of that was honestly just chilling. As far as we had the spring fling, which was dope, which brought a lot of players in. I got to talk to a lot of the players about some in-depth stuff about SPL and teams and all this, that, and a third. So that was all fun and games. And now we're back to the competition. We're back to the games. We're back to the actual league. And that means we're back to the picks. So week 6 here, Thursday, 3 p.m. That's like almost 12 hours away. Sort of. Soar versus Randosos is our first go. And I mean, so last week, or the other picks that I've done in the past, I think you've been able to see me just Randosos. Like, LOL, they're not going to win. I don't think that's necessarily the case here. Not in this matchup. I mean, in general. Randozos now have, you saw how they played in week number 5, like before the bye week. You saw how they played. They looked very good. With that in mind, it's Soar versus Randozos. So, yeah. Eager versus Denial is a lot more interesting, I think. Denial have not been good the majority of this season. They've been solid okay, right? Not good, not bad. Eager, on the other hand, have been relatively good. Eager have performed very, very well. And what's interesting about these two teams is they actually have the same amount of games. We have teams that haven't all played the same amount. Eager and Denial have. So when you see 8-4 and 6-6, those are like that's a raw win-loss. You can judge that against each other. And one of the bigger differences, however, is for Denial. Denial brought Mask back on. They looked like a completely different team. They looked absolutely fantastic. So when it comes down to it, it's a lot different. And the concerns that you usually have when a team makes a new acquisition aren't necessarily there for me. One, I know that Mask is talented. I've seen Mask be talented in the SPL as recent as very soon, or very recently, I should say. I know that happens. And he did it on Denial. Denial's the team, and, it's no secret that these guys hang out together. These guys are friends. These guys are cool. And that makes you a better team. Not by itself. You require a lot of X, Y, and Z. But that I'm just much happier with Mask on this lineup than I am with any other lineup. So I think that this is a more interesting matchup with how hot Team Eager has been. So with that in mind, I think this is closer to a split, right? I think this is closer for a split. But Eager have won the last 6 games. They're on a 6-game winning streak. And the bye week might have cooled that off, but I think that Eager getting time to sort of refine how they've been winning, whereas Denial have to start from not square one, but earlier on. I don't know. I think that this one is really tough to call. And I'm going to put down Eager, but that's just because they've been super hot. The bye week might have cooled that off, and that's definitely a possibility. But they haven't lost in 6 games. I think that's valuable. And so we'll see that. I think Eager is the one here. LG versus ALG is next. And LG are coming into this. I don't know if you guys heard. Snoopy is no longer the solo laner. Scary D is going to step in. That's kind of crazy for me. Scary D has sort of been the fill-in guy for a lot of these teams. He never winds up being the permanent, right? He just winds up being like a fill-in guy for the most part. Scary D here, I've heard people that I respect, players I respect, like Polar Bear Mike mainly, say that Scary D is a good player in the set and a third. I haven't necessarily seen it, but that could be said about Mask if I didn't know him closer. That could be said about Jiffy before he started to perform. A lot of players have looked like that. So I think it's unfair for me to just straight up call Scary D bad. I just haven't seen, we haven't seen performance out of him. So he's a big old question mark. For me, with Allegiance, the change to Mackie, we already saw it perform. We already saw it work out. We already saw it do what it's supposed to do. So I am expecting Allegiance to win at least one. I think the overall talent level of Luminosity in the 4 other roles is good enough to make this a situation where Luminosity doesn't just tank, right? Like, I definitely don't think that LG is in a horrible, horrible spot. I think this winds up realistically being a split. I think Allegiance winds up exposing Scary D, or not necessarily him, but the way the team is able to interact with Scary D on this short of a notice. And at the same time, Luminosity is just talented enough to like win one in other places and mitigate whatever's going on in that soul. And I think this winds up being a split down the middle. Fnatic versus Leftovers is also pretty interesting. Fnatic, how might he fallen? Fnatic, they haven't looked good all season, but the last matches they played weren't so terrible. We can take a look at the schedule over here, and we see week 5 over here, and Fnatic wound up, they won 2 over Torpedo, which was, you know, a little too close. And then Panthera, like they got beat by Panthera. So the win over Torpedo, you know, they looked a little bit better. More importantly, Jiffy looked good. He's always been the question, or he's been the question up to this point in that jungle, and that week he wound up performing well. For Leftovers, this was a team that I was really hot on coming into the season, and they started pretty high and they've slowly started declining. I think that Leftovers is still a good team, but I think that with the amount of time that Fnatic was able to practice, given that extra week, I think that bye week is very, very, very good for a team in Fnatic's shoes. Now listen to this. Fnatic is doing poorly. They come in with 2 different replacements in the jungle and mid role, in the jungle and support role. And keep in mind, one of the biggest parts of this meta right now is those 3. I mean, we call them the core of the team because they're always just, it's a 3v3 in mid lane. That's what goes down. So when you replace 2 players, regardless of if you think they're good or an upgrade from the players that you've replaced, the incomers, they're in a spot where like, that it's not even synergy at that point. It's just literally the game plan. You know, everybody has to come to the same page, and ideally you can do that before the league starts. But I think it's common opinion that SPL is very different than practice or scrims or whatever you want to call it, right? So with that in mind, Fnatic go ahead and they come into the season and they try their best and they win a couple. They're 5-11. They win a couple, but not the majority of the games they play. And they're constantly just trying to figure out how to make this mid-jungle support thing work when they haven't had to do that for years. So now Fnatic take that situation, and they're able to look with this bye week in the middle, they're able to go ahead and look at the games that they've played. They can look at the tape, not necessarily just, you know, pure plays, but also just what can they improve on. They can use that week. All right, we know the mistakes that we've made. One of the nice things about this bye week is you can look back and say, this is what we need to fix. This is okay. This is fantastic. We should emphasize the size of the game, etc., etc., etc. So I think that Fnatic coming into this week will come off hot. I have a feeling about Fnatic doing well. I think this winds up being a 2-0 over Leftovers. I want to follow that up with Leftovers can sneak a win here, or it wouldn't even be sneaking a win, but I think Fnatic comes out of the bye week hot. CC versus Torpedo. I think this is a relatively easy question to answer. Unfortunately for Torpedo, I think that Cringe Crew is, even with the change of solo lane from Zashu, previously known as Stevie Beefy, from Zashu to Axios, Cringe Crew is still just doing fine. I'm not like concerned about Cringe Crew at the moment. I don't think they'll be top anytime soon. I don't think Panthera's going to fall that far. But I think Cringe Crew and Dignitas are my 2, like, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's the top 4 of the league right there. Cringe Crew, Dignitas, Paradigm, Panthera. I think that's the top 4 of the league. And Torpedo, I think, winds up on the bottom of the league. I think they wind up on the high end of the low end, if you will. But I think Cringe Crew just sort of outclasses Torpedo here. 2-0. Panthera versus Dignitas. I have said in the past that I think Dignitas can take games off of Panthera. I think Panthera, if they wind up with 1 loss, I think that's probably what's going to go down. But if anyone beats them again, it'll be Dignitas. I made the stretch call last time, asking for the Dignitas win. I'm not going to do it again. Trust in the cats. Paradigm versus Hunger for More. Again, this one's very quick. Just 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. Paradigm, very, very, very strong, and Hunger for More, they've gotten better in the past couple of weeks, but not as, I don't think they can match. I don't think they can dance with Paradigm. Dignitas and Hungry for More. I mean, I think that's the same situation as the previous one. I think Dignitas is just a little bit more clean than Hungry for More. I like the direction Hungry for More is going in, and it's rather unfortunate that I have to play Paradigm and Dignitas in a doubleheader, you know, off of their upswing into the bye week. It would be wonderful if their strength of schedule gave them something nicer, but nah. Enemy versus Envy. Now, Envy has made a bunch of role swaps, and this is the first time we're going to see it. Enemy is a fantastic team. Like, a fantastic team. They have looked absolutely fantastic, and they are fantastic. Fantastic. I'm saying that so many times because people are still reluctant. Still, at this point. Now, I won't talk about last year so much. I think you do have to bring last year's performance from Enemy into context because of the leadership of Pain, whether it's in-game or out-of-game, whatever the story is behind that. There is clearly something that is good with Pain. He's able to work from that general position, that leader position in some capacity to create a winning environment and wind up winning. You don't get this lucky this often. It just doesn't happen. So Pain here, he's doing something. And you can, yes, Pain succeeded last year, but it was with a drastically different lineup. So getting to second place at Worlds, I think you give Pain credit for making a good team. I think you give the team credit for making it second place at Worlds, along with the bracket. But for Enemy, I think that this team, this season, has already solidified itself to be a good team. I think that these guys have already made their point. They're already that good. 10-4, and they beat some of the better teams. Envy, with their role changes, I think, are one of the better teams. Will they be able to snap into it? I'm curious. I'm less curious about Omega than Kiki, simply because I think that Omega is one of the more talented Smite players in the world. I think that the change from solo to jungle is very drastic, but I think that Omega, who has always been a late game shot caller, can adapt and adjust to play the jungle at a high level. He's a cerebral player. He tends to try to outmaneuver and out-strategize his opponent instead of just pure out-force them, and I think that winds up working out well in the jungle. Omega's God pool is also it's super wide. See, I caught myself and didn't say fantastic again. It's super wide. He's got a lot of gods available to him. So I think that Omega winds up transitioning to the jungle very, very easily. As far as Kiki to the Hunter role, I'm a little bit more concerned. I'm not concerned to the point where I don't believe in this team just yet, because Kiki has made the transition from over to support pretty much easily, no problem. So I don't know. We'll see how it works out. I am cautiously excited about this Envy roster looking specifically at the duo lane. With that said, their past performance has not been strong. I think Enemy winds up 2-0ing Envy. Yeah, I think Envy winds up 2-0ing Envy. It's tough to not call a split here because Ionic in support, Cyclone in solo, that just sounds nasty. We'll see. We'll see. Actually, retraction. I do go split here. Just because I trust in the guys on Envy to work well enough to figure out what needs to work. I think Enemy beats Envy regardless. But Envy figures out what needs to work and they might be able to sneak a win off of that. Just understanding their game plan. I think that Envy comes in understanding their game plan, and Enemy's able to outperform that at some point. This is a tight matchup. This is a scary matchup. Enemy versus Soar. I know this isn't our Monday Night Smite game, but this is one of the games of the week for me. This is going to be a lot of fun. I think it's very possible we see Soar 2-0ing here, which is kind of crazy because of all that wonderful stuff I just said about Enemy. I think it's possible we see Soar with the 2-0. I'm leaning towards Soar here. I'm definitely leaning towards Soar here. Enemy has a lot of things going for them. But Soar, I mean, they are playing very well. They don't really show many mistakes, honestly. I think Baskin will have a good matchup against Marauder. And I think Verizial does well in this matchup as well against Homie FA. Just because Verizial's a little bit more flexible, or Verizial has shown to be a little bit more flexible than Homie up until this point as far as God selection and overall role on the current composition of the team, if you will, whether he's aggressive or defensive. This one's interesting. I'm doing this one on the spot because I've been thinking about this one for a couple of days, and it's interesting. Man, I think I want to call Soar here because of their veteranship, because of how much longer these guys have been playing the game than Enemy, or at least at the SPL level. I want to call Soar because of their veteranship. But I think the leadership of Pain outdoes that. These are two very, very evenly matched teams. I think Enemy wins game 1 and Soar wins game 2. I think Soar is able to adapt how Enemy wins in game number 1. See, I went the split and I went the extra mile for you. Envy versus the Randozos. Again, I have a lot of faith in this. I have a lot of faith in this role swap. I think Envy wins this over Dozos. I think Envy wins this over Dozos. I mean, if I have to think about and give Envy a split against Enemy, then Randozos has to be a no-brainer. Otherwise, I feel a lot more strongly about you know what I mean? And our second Monday Night Smite game, Paradigm versus Torpedo. I think Torpedo can technically win a game here. They're going to have to work for it a lot. I put my money on Paradigm 2-0. We'll run through this real quick. Nice. Last one was 20 minutes. I thought it was too long. We'll run through this one real quick. Soar over Randozos. I think that's not that much to think about. Eager versus Denial. There is more to think about, but Eager's coming off of a 6-game winning streak before the bye week, so I think this one goes over to Eager. LG versus ALG. Luminosity just made the change in their solo lane away from Snoopy towards Scary D. They have to adjust to that. Allegiance have already adjusted to Mr. Mackey. Plus, they have a week in between being able to look at what went wrong in the games with Mr. Mackey. They have that week to adjust and improve their game even more so. Luminosity, on the other hand, they're coming into this week with Scary D. I think that Luminosity is able to just get a split because they're talented enough, but Allegiance are overall the more cohesive team at the moment. Fnatic with the bye week and their performance in the early season, which was abysmal. I think the Fnatic is able to look at their mistakes, similar to what I just said about Mr. Mackey on ALG. I think Fnatic's able to look at their problems, able to adjust, and I think the potential talent on Fnatic is higher than the current talent of Team Leftovers. And so I give this 2-0 to Fnatic, assuming they did their homework over the weekend. Cringe Crew versus Torpedo. I think these two teams are just unevenly matched. Cringe Crew has just proven to be a stronger team. Paradigm versus Hunger for More. Same exact story. Dignitas versus Hunger for More. Unfortunately, Hunger for More are on an upswing. Right before the bye week, they looked a little bit better. But, eesh. They're running into two of the stronger teams in the league, in Paradigm and Dignitas. It's just unfortunate that Hunger for More runs into those guys this week. Enemy versus Envy. Normally I would give this to Enemy, no questions asked, but I think Envy, I have a lot of faith in the role swaps, and I know I said before how I wanted to see how people adjusted to new players. This is new roles. Everybody on the team is still the same, they're just switching around. Omega's from solo over to jungle, Cyclone Spin from Hunter over to solo, etc. So everybody's just shifting around. They're playing musical roles. I have a lot of faith in this, and I acknowledge I'm going out on a limb. I think if you want to be safe to your FP, you pick up the Enemy, but Envy, I think, I am confident in their swap. Enemy and Soar, I think, are just two very evenly matched opponents. I think that Enemy wins game number 1. Soar adjusts a little bit better than Enemy expects, and Soar wins game number 2. Envy versus Randozos, two teams on the other side of each other. Paradigm and Torpedo, pretty much the same thing. So that's going to be week number 6. It's been a long day, sorry guys. And that'll do it. So thanks for watching, subscribe, and all that stuff, and I'll catch you guys next